Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Welcome to today's webinar, which is done exclusively for the Royal Society of Medicine members. And our title today will be Publishing in Medicine, and we will be sharing with you tips to avoid common pitfalls. My name is Despina Sanudu. I did my PhD in molecular cytogenetics at the University of Cambridge, so I'm a biologist in training, and I'm currently an associate professor at the Medical School of the University of Athens and a researcher at the Biomedical Research Foundation of the Academy of Athens. I have, in between these two positions, served as a postdoctoral fellow and an instructor at the Harvard Medical School. But more importantly, for the purposes of this presentation, I have served as an author, reviewer, and editor for various scientific journals internationally. So I'm looking forward to share with you my experiences and knowledge acquired during this time. Because of these experiences, I dare say that the process of getting a paper accepted very much resembles the picture you see on your left-hand side. It is a bumpy road, and you can encounter a series of obstacles along the way. So the purpose of today's presentation is by no means to guarantee that your paper will get accepted the next day it's submitted, definitely not, but it's aimed at giving you some tips and keys on how to minimize the obstacles you will encounter and how to address, face in the best possible way the obstacles that you will. So the key points that we will be going through during this presentation, our agenda, include the first step, which is setting the foundations for your project, selecting your study design, making sure you comply to research ethics, developing good writing skills, following publication ethics, selecting the right journal for your manuscript, ensuring that you follow the guidelines, being very courteous towards the editor and the reviewers, and handling rejection when and if it happens. So why do clinicians perform different studies, and why do they publish? There's a broad range of different reasons, but the top three usually are the desire to contribute to science and research by new discoveries by addressing hot scientific questions and providing their contribution to the international scientific scene. A very important reason is also the promotion of their career. Publications significantly strengthen our CV, and to a large extent, it's a major parameter based on which we're judged to get a position, a new position, to get promoted, and to get credit for our contribution to science as a whole. It's a very important parameter in how we're viewed in the science world, in the medical world. And a third very important parameter is the contribution to clinical and public health. The desire to answer questions that may arise during clinical practice, to share with others observations, important observations, novel observations from their clinical practice, and this way to help promote healthcare internationally. Of course, there's a series of other reasons. Now, the outcome of this work can and should be published, and there's a very broad range of different types of articles that allow us to present our work in the scientific literature. So let's start going through these step by step. First of all, there are different study types in medical research. Some of them you may already be aware of. There are primary and secondary study types. So under the primary study types, we have the preclinical, clinical, and epidemiological. Now, the preclinical can be separated, divided into the theoretical and applied. Clinical and epidemiological can each be divided in observational and interventional. So the observational, as the word pretty much indicates, is when the observations from clinical practice are put together and reported, whereas interventional is when there are interventions that are performed in clinical practice, and the outcome of those interventions is then described and presented in the literature. And then we have the secondary study types, which can be divided in meta-analysis and literature reviews. And there is a significant difference between these two. Meta-analysis involves actual research work, analysis work, statistical and bioinformatical analysis. So it gives rise to new data by using data that have already been published. So in meta-analysis, one is collecting data from previous studies, from a large number of different studies, using specific criteria that fit their study design, and then they analyze these data and they come up with new data, basically. Whereas in the literature review, it's, as it says, a review of the literature, trying to summarize observations in the literature to date, make comparisons of those publications, identify common points, identify discrepancies, the authors provide their critical view as to the challenges that remain in the field, the direction this field is going to be taking in the future, etc. So these studies equally important but very different in nature. But from the study to the publication involves a lengthy and bumpy road. In this slide, I've tried to put together some of the milestones that need to be reached. And first of all is the appropriate study design. Once you have decided on the type of the study design is the one that will set the foundations for your work. Then you're collecting the data and analyzing the data, which obviously need to be very accurate, very well analyzed, very objectively presented and appropriately presented. And then comes the selection of the right journal for this work, the preparation of the manuscript, the submission of the manuscript, and then the handling of the reviewer comments when they arise. Let's go through these milestones step by step. It's extremely important when starting a project to set the right foundations right from the start, right from day one. And day one is when you start deciding what's the scientific question that you will be addressing with your project. You need to formulate a persuasive research question, a novel research question on a topic that is as popular as possible if that fits your goals, because this will attract the most attention to your work. So you start by observing and deciding what's the area that you want to focus on. Then you look into the open questions in that area. What are the most important questions in that field today? And which ones of those questions are closer to your own interests? Then you need to read up on the literature as much as possible and discuss with other scientists in the field as much as possible in order to get a very good understanding as to the latest developments in that field, the directions that are currently being pursued, so as to decide where there is room for you to get involved and contribute something important, valuable, and complementary to all the other work that is ongoing. You don't want to end a project and at the end realize that someone else has already done it or had already done it before you even started. So all this literature analysis is extremely important right at the beginning before you move on with the initiation of your project. So through this reading and thinking and discussing, you're aiming to slowly refine the research topic that you will be pursuing. And you need to question yourself and reassess what it is that you want to work on. And you will be devoting a considerable amount of time, maybe even years, to research. Why you need to set strong foundations right from the start? Because you want to avoid criticism on the novelty of your work. It's extremely disappointing to submit a paper after many, probably years, or at best case scenario, many months of work, only to find out that a reviewer is stating that this is not a novel scientific question and it's been researched considerably before. You want to avoid any doubts on the robustness of your study design. You want to avoid any concerns about the ethics of your work, for sure. And you want to avoid any questionable statistical analysis. So how do you avoid criticism on the novelty of your work? And I know I'll be partly repeating some points here, but that's because they're extremely important and easy to neglect sometimes, especially when we're over-enthusiastic about starting a new research project, embarking on the pursuit of novel findings. So do remember, it's crucial to perform an exhaustive literature search on the topic that you're considering to research and publish. It's important to talk to other experts in the field, even if you don't want to fully disclose your ideas because you're afraid of competition. It's important to talk to other experts in order to get a feel for where the field stands currently. What are the latest developments? What are the hottest trends? And based on that, to start forming your decisions and your directions. It's very important to attend international conferences or international webinars, as it's currently the state of affairs, and aim to attend ones that are organized by the most prominent scientific societies in the field or the fields that you're interested in. Conferences where there will be a lot of experts from that area who will be talking or mingling, people you will be able to learn from and interact with. Try your best to avoid doubts on the robustness of your study design. And how do we do that? First of all, by defining the scientific question you aim to answer with the ways that we just discussed, by choosing the most appropriate experimental approach, and this is where you carefully need to lay out your experimental plan, not just the short term for the next month or two, but the experimental plan, if possible, for your entire project. Sure, depending on the findings, you may need to introduce new experiments along the way, but it's important to have a pretty clear direction right from the start as to where you want to head. If your research involves patients and a cohort, human subjects, ensure that the sample size is appropriate for the questions to be addressed. Often it's recommended to do a power analysis so that you know right from the start how many individuals or how many samples you will be needing in order to reach statistical significance in your analysis. And also make sure that your cohort is very well characterized. You want to minimize the heterogeneity there so that you can achieve statistical significance with smaller numbers. Often it's recommended that you include multiple cohorts, individuals, patients, groups from different populations. This is encouraged as it will demonstrate that your observations hold across different populations. Bear in mind it's extremely important to set in place all the necessary controls, not only biological controls, but also technical controls. And also remember to include a set of validation experiments for your findings. It's very important to avoid concerns about the ethics of your approach. Towards this direction, make sure that you obtain right from the start all necessary approvals by the required ethics boards, committees in your hospital, your institute, your country, and keep in mind that the ethical approvals needed may differ between countries, may differ between institutions or hospitals or research centers, so make sure you know exactly what applies in your specific situation. And it may be the case that you may need more than one approvals depending on where you work and what the regulations are at your location. This is important to know right from the start. And even if you were to apply for a grant to fund this research project that you're thinking of doing, you would need to mention in the grant proposal what ethics approvals you're intending to obtain from where. In this context, and when working with human subjects, it's important to prepare, use, and store appropriately the necessary informed consent forms. And these forms will be requested by the ethics committees and will need to be approved for you to use. And along with those forms, it's extremely important to know what the process is, the procedure is for obtaining informed consent, and ensure that you abide to those rules and you follow the appropriate process to obtain the informed consent. Needless to say, it's extremely important to respect GDPR and to be very careful with anonymity, wherever this is indicated or required. Generally, it's very important to abide to all medical data protection regulations that are applying internationally and nationally and at your institute, wherever you're based. These are important parameters to know right from the start. And once you have completed your work and collected all your data, it's the time to prepare a great manuscript and go ahead with submission. So how do you do this? Once you have all your data, you've done your analysis, you have your beautiful figures and photos and images and diagrams, you need to start putting them together in an appealing manuscript that will convince not only the reviewers, but will entice the readers. So we start by avoiding weak titles. It needs to be an objective, clear and to the point title. Not too lengthy, not too short, not too vague, not too boring, not too similar to other titles in the literature. Avoid poor abstracts because this is the first thing the reader and the reviewer will read. If it's poor quality or boring or uninformative, you're likely to lose their interest. Avoid confusing structures. Smooth flow always makes for a much more pleasant read. And the more pleasant it is, the more the reader will get out of it. Avoid poor content. Avoid poor use of English and avoid low quality figures and tables. You may have wonderful data, but you need to present them in a beautiful way as well. So presentation is extremely important when it comes to preparing a manuscript. And now I need to point out some mistakes that are truly catastrophic. And any single one of them on this slide is more than sufficient to lead to immediate rejection and to a lot of trouble, I must say. So first of all, make sure that you're aware of the authorship guidelines stated by the International Consortium of Medical Journals editors. So you need to make sure that you know who should be included in your author list and who should be omitted from your author list. Anyone who has contributed to this work a substantial amount should be included as an author. Forgetting to include someone or intentionally omitting someone is not acceptable and will cause significant problems. Honorary authorship is also a bad practice. If someone has not contributed substantially to the work performed towards a manuscript, experimental, theoretical, or writing, then they should not be included in your author list. Duplicate publication is a big no-no. You cannot submit the same manuscript to 2 journals unless it has first been rejected, finally rejected by 1 journal, and then you're pursuing a submission to a different journal. But you can never, should never submit the same manuscript to 2 journals or more at the same time. Now, data fabrication and data falsification. Needless to say, they're huge problems, major mistakes, catastrophic mistakes, can not only lead to immediate rejection, but manuscript withdrawal, retraction at a later stage if it has already been published. So data fabrication, we basically mean that someone's making up the numbers or the figures or the data, any form of data presented in the manuscript, It's absolutely unacceptable, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Data falsification is again manipulating your data to shift it towards the direction that you wish, extending way beyond what it objectively is. So this is omitting data that you don't like, or shifting the numbers towards directions you like, or any manipulation really. Absolutely unacceptable. Image manipulation, equally bad. Yes, we may sometimes moderately improve contrast or sharpness and try to make visible in a more clear way what's there, but we're not modifying what's there. We're not introducing bands on gels, and we're not introducing or deleting signals that are there. So image manipulation requires great care, keeping in mind that we need to be as objective as possible. Plagiarism or self-plagiarism, another major problem often encountered intentionally or accidentally. And you must be aware that every journal today has the necessary software to search for and detect plagiarism right away. Every editor has that available, and they do use it for every single manuscript. If plagiarism is obvious, your manuscript can get rejected right away, or in a best case scenario, you will be asked to rewrite the sections that appear to have been plagiarized. Be very careful. It does not give a good impression, and if extensive plagiarism is observed, it can lead to serious problems. Non-disclosure of conflict of interest is also unacceptable. If there is conflict of interest, make sure you disclose it in your manuscript where indicated. Most journals have a specific location where this should be stated. And then once your manuscript is ready, there comes the time to choose the right journal for your work. And you know, I'm sure you do, that there's so many options, so many different journals out there to choose from. Journals not only in different disciplines, but for different types of manuscripts and for different experts, for different expertise, for different fields, all sorts of different options. So how do you go about choosing the right journal for your work? First of all, you need to find a journal that is as close as possible to your aim and scope. So if you're working in a specific field, field A, it's not advisable to start looking into journals for field B or C or D. You need something that is a good home for your manuscript, for your work, where your field of expertise and interest and where the field where this paper belongs is aligned with the field where the journal belongs. Another parameter to bear in mind that's helpful is accessibility and discoverability. How easy will it be for readers, interested readers, to find your publication, to find this journal? Is it listed in Scopus, in PubMed, in iExplore, in CiteSeer, Crossref? Can people find it in social media? And accessibility. Will your manuscript be free open access, or does the journal require a subscription? These are important parameters because it will affect how many people can find your manuscript, how many people will read it, and consequently how many people will cite it. Third parameter is to look into the quality of those journals that you are likely interested in. Who are their editors? Are they experts in the field? Who are their reviewers? Again, what's their track record? What's the track record of the journal? What's the impact factor of the journal? Who is the publisher? How reputable is the publisher? What's their website like? Is it user-friendly? Is it high quality? Does it appear professional? What's the speed of publishing? When you have your manuscript ready to be submitted, usually we're all eager to get it out as fast as possible, and we don't want this process to be prolonged unnecessarily. So what's the speed of publishing for the specific journals that are getting into your shortlist? And then the publication model. Will you be paying for the publication? Will the readers be paying? Again, open access subscription. Do you have the funds to cover the cost of publication? And then if you're still finding it hard to choose between journals, there are some tools that can help you along this way, such as the Think Check Submit tool or the Find My Journal or the database of open access journals, etc. Some things to watch out for when you're trying to decide on your journal. First of all, avoid journals that are that have a completely different scope. It will reach readers that are not that interested or not interested at all on this topic. You will be losing readers that would have otherwise appreciated and found use for the information in your manuscript. Avoid journals aimed at different target groups. And definitely avoid going only for the impact factor. A very high impact factor in a journal that belongs in a completely different field will not help you, the promotion of your work, or the advancement of your career or your CV. If you're a heart surgeon and you publish a manuscript in a journal that has to do with plant research, it won't benefit you as much as a different journal could have. Another common mistake when we are starting out is underestimating or overestimating our work. We want to avoid, though, both of these. We don't want to underestimate our work and aim very low because we're missing out the opportunity of a greater recognition of our work. And we don't want to grossly overestimate our work because this will lead to multiple rounds of rejection, which has practical as well as admittedly psychological implications. So try to be as objective as possible about the quality and the importance of your work, and try to aim to the appropriate level of scientific journal. Your mentors, your supervisors, your peers could help you towards this direction. And one more point, very important point that we need to discuss to some extent is avoiding predatory journals. And why do we need to discuss this? Because unfortunately, the number of predatory journals appears to be pretty high, possibly increasing. In 2017 alone, there was a total of 24,840 publications in approximately 830 predatory journals, actively predatory journals. And there were scientists from all over the world, from all different countries, as you can see in this diagram, that accidentally published their manuscripts, their work in these journals. These journals are predatory journals, are fake journals, and let's see some of their characteristics so that you have a better understanding as to what they are, how to detect them, and why you should avoid them. The warning signs for predatory journals are, for example, that they're not transparent about the publisher identity and location. They tend to boast unofficial or fake journal impact factors. They're falsely claiming to be indexed in PubMed. They tend to send a lot of spam email solicitations for submissions or editorial board memberships. They're promising acceptance decisions within a very short period of time. And admittedly, I've seen colleagues submit their manuscripts one day and getting an acceptance letter the very next, indicating that it was never even sent to reviewers. Of course, they had to withdraw their submission once they realized, but some people may not realize on time and get trapped in an unpleasant situation. Predatory journals usually lack a named editor-in-chief with academic credentials. They may have a website riddled with grammatical errors and broken links, and they tend to publish articles that may have not been professionally typeset. So these are some of the points to look out for in order to avoid predatory journals. It would look very bad on a CV to have publications in predatory journals. Now, targeting the wrong journal in general for any of the aforementioned reasons can lead to a number of troubles, inconveniences. One is the unnecessary delay in publication. The wrong journal will lead to multiple rejection cycles, or the series of wrong journals, if there's more than one, will even prolong even longer the publication process. These multiple rejections are not only frustrating, but by wasting precious time, you're running into the risk of being scooped by another team who's come up with similar findings, who may publish before you. And as your manuscript is being sent out to reviewers, if it is before it gets rejected, the more and more people in the field are becoming familiar with your data, therefore increasing the chances of someone else rushing to publish their findings if they happen to become aware that you're going through the same process as well. So for these reasons, it's important to try your best to identify the best suited journal for your work right from the start, and try to prepare your manuscript, the letter to the editor, your response to the reviewer comments in the best possible way to smoothen and expedite this process. So during this process, make sure you avoid right from the start the wrong type or the wrong size of manuscript. Avoid incorrect formatting. These are simple steps. We can all make sure that we address them right from the start, but it does give a bad impression if you don't. Avoid mistakes in the letter to the editor. Avoid dismissing valid reviewer comments when you reach that stage, and avoid disappointment if your manuscript gets rejected. But let's look at each one of those step by step. Avoiding the wrong type or size of manuscript. Let's look at the different types of manuscripts that are out there so that you're aware of your options. We have the manuscripts that are on clinical trials, systematic reviews, or meta-analysis. These manuscripts tend to have extremely strong evidence and need to be prepared accordingly. Then we have the original research articles, brief communications, letters to the editor, or technical reports. These also have strong evidence but require different formatting. And then we have case reports, commentaries, opinion type manuscripts, where the evidence may be very important, but it's weaker because there's fewer evidence included usually in each one of these types of manuscripts. So less evidence is required to be able to put together and submit a manuscript that falls under these categories. Let's take an example. If you want to publish a unique and striking clinical outcome of a disease, so an observation from the clinic on one or a handful of cases, what type of article can you publish based on it, and which journal would you aim at? So from all the different options that we mentioned 2 slides before, a journal that focuses, well, a manuscript that has the format of a case report would seem appropriate for this type of topic and study design. But to publish a case report, you have options in different journals. You have specialized case report journals that tend to have something between 15% to 65% acceptance rates and a faster review process than the mainstream medical journals, but they may have a small target group and a low or no impact factor. Then again, another advantage is that the vast majority of case report journals are open access, so it will be easier for more people to see your manuscript free of charge. So these are parameters to weigh when it comes to deciding where you would want to send, for example, your case report. Once you have submitted your precious manuscript along with a very polite letter to the editor, you may be receiving a set of reviewer comments. It's extremely important how you go about addressing those reviewer comments, no matter if they're a few or many, if they're polite or on rare occasions impolite. Regardless of whether they understood exactly what you wanted to say or if they didn't understand so well. In any scenario, in any case, you need to be extremely polite and extremely careful in how you address all their concerns, all their questions, by providing an answer, more data if needed, more evidence if needed, more literature to support your writings. So these would be points 1, 2, 3 on this slide. If you disagree with a comment that the reviewer made, make sure that you answer in a very polite fashion and explain why you disagree in an objective fashion by providing more evidence if needed, better clarifications if needed, or more bibliography to show that there's more scientists out there that have made similar observations or have similar opinions. But in any case, make sure that your response to the reviewers is point by point, 1, 2, 3, fully answered, carefully answered, even if they're just asking for the correction of a typing error. Now here are some points to avoid, some approaches to avoid, and some practices and approaches to opt for. Some inappropriate responses would be, "Dear reviewer, you just didn't understand what we wrote. That experiment you're recommending, dear reviewer, would take forever and we can't do it right now. Dear reviewer, you didn't even read what we wrote." Or, "Dear reviewer, you're being too picky about grammar and formatting," or too untrusting of our observations. So obviously, and I hope you're laughing with me at those comments right now, these would be inappropriate comments. And we don't want anything that reads like this or sounds like this or gives this impression. On the contrary, we want expressions and approaches such as, "We appreciate the reviewer's valuable feedback and we have now clarified the text," and you indicate the page and the lines where you have included the revised sentences. You may say, "The suggested experiment is very interesting, however, we feel that it is beyond the scope of our study." Or even better, if you can go ahead and do the experiment and include the results. Third scenario, when you feel that they didn't fully read what you wrote, "We did not intend to indicate XYZ and have therefore altered the text to specify parentheses, whatever it is that you specified." Or in the scenario where you feel that they have been too picky, apologize for the errors that you may have made and indicate by thanking him or her that you have now addressed all their concerns, followed all their suggestions, made the changes in the revised manuscript, and it's also helpful in every response to indicate the exact page and line in the manuscript where you've made those changes. And last but not least, keep in mind, minimize the disappointment if your manuscript gets rejected. In many cases, it's the rule, not the exception. Everyone has been rejected once or more than once, depending on the length of their career. Being rejected is part of the process. It's part of getting better in the way you think, in the way you write, in the way you think things through. Everyone's manuscripts are rejected sometimes, or many times. But what we can do from those rejections is to learn from the reviewer comments or the editor comments, or learn from the process. And every time we resubmit, we get better. Rejection from one journal may really be the opportunity to improve and proceed to publish in an even better journal. And this is not a hypothetical scenario. I've experienced it. I have many colleagues who have experienced it. The rejection could be the incentive or the opportunity, and the reviewer comments could be the helpful guidance one may need to make their manuscript or their project even better, to enrich their findings, to obtain better figures, to prepare better diagrams, to write a more convincing, objective, enticing text, and proceed to submit in an even higher impact or broader interest journal and achieve a better publication. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention and wish you every success in your projects and your manuscript submissions, and wishing you all the best in your research and your submissions. Take care. Goodbye.